Rico. Ada is an on-camera meteorologist, WIPR-TV in Puerto Rico. She is the 2018 National Weather Person of the Year.
Thank you. Thank you.
She's the founder of what's called EcoExploratorio. It's a museum, it's a STEM museum.
Exactly.
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Been working on that project for many, many years. And oh, by the way, she went to Florida State University.
So you know.
And has worked at the Weather Service.
Exactly, right. Weather Service.
So you have quite the resume, but and I want to approach this chronologically. And as we talk, you'll see a lot of pictures from what Ada is involved with and what has happened with Maria. But I want to go chronologically, and because how you came to where you are today is so relevant to what you're doing today. Tell us a little bit more about Ada, where you grew up, what it was like, and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you especially to the Board of Directors of Flash for this wonderful award. Thank you so much. I was born in 1965 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I was raised by my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. The three of them were teachers of science, math, and Spanish. So you can imagine how my education was enforced at home. We didn't have a car. Our resources were very limited. But I was a good student, and I wanted to be a meteorologist since I was 6 or 7 years old. I had this beautiful book by Time Life magazine called Weather, and I knew it by heart. I knew every cloud. My house would get flooded very easily, and then I loved when emergency management came to my house and they pull us out of the floods. So I thought that was very cool at that time, you know. And I loved thunderstorms, and I loved wind, and my mother thought I was crazy. So when I graduated from high school, I was accepted at FSU, but of course we couldn't afford it at that time. And so I went into the University of Puerto Rico. I got my bachelor's degree in math and physics, and then I went to my master's degree with a NASA fellowship to FSU. Then I got married. I went to work for the National Weather Service Forecast Office as an intern. Then I went into forecasting, then into WPM, which is the Warning and Preparedness Meteorologist. At that time I had 2 kids. I couldn't work shifts anymore. So I went to teach at the university. And then then we had Hurricane Louise and Marilyn. And then I went
1995.
1995, exactly. Right. So I went to work for FEMA, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And I loved it. And I really found my mission. I knew why I was doing the meteorology, because I wanted to save lives. And I understood that I owed to the people translating science into the service for the public safety.
And I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that she is the most trusted voice in meteorology in all of Puerto Rico. That is simply the fact.
Yeah, it's been 30 years. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about how things were going in Puerto Rico before Maria, so that we can understand the context of what has happened since.
In Puerto Rico, as you know, there are many issues politically and economically. So before Hurricane Maria, we were in a very fragile state, especially in the economic side. So we've been going through different government administrations, and our energy grid was very weak. Housing has been also very weak. No enforcement or complying the building codes in many areas. And, you know, poverty has been increasing amazingly. It has been very high in the last few years. So we just had a new administration coming into the in 2017. And then we had Hurricane Maria at the worst moment, where we were going through a fiscal board, economic board that was taking care of all the finances of Puerto Rico, so it couldn't come at a worse time. And yeah, it has been a very long and hard year. It's incredible. It has been 13, almost 14 months, and still, you know, we're making strides, we're making progress, but still you visit some areas and it seems like it was yesterday that the hurricane hit. But definitely, if you go to the San Juan metro area and other places in Puerto Rico, things have improved considerably. Tourism is back. You know, restaurants are open, hotels are opening little by little. But yeah, it's been very hard.
And prior to Maria, for years and years, you all knew you were hurricane vulnerable. You were a very prominent voice in hurricane preparedness for many years, and as one shining example of that, for year after year after year, every spring we would bring the Hurricane Hunter aircraft from the Air Force to Puerto Rico for the Caribbean Hurricane Awareness Tour stop. It was an annual tradition, a very important one, to stop in Puerto Rico on the last day of the tour after having gone to the other countries. And Ada was always there when I was there on the tour, welcomed us with open arms, interviewed us, opened up her home, just treated us like royalty, and wanted to thank you for that. You were obviously concerned about what would happen if a major hurricane struck Puerto Rico again. What did you worry about before Maria that you were trying to get the message out on those awareness tours and everything you were doing with hurricane preparedness? You know, before Maria, what were you worried about?
I was very concerned about the economic situation because I knew that people we will not have the resources to prepare for a catastrophic hurricane. Not even a Category 1, not even a Category 4 or 5. Also, it has been many years since we've had a Category 4 or 5 hurricane. Then I knew that people didn't understand what 175-mile-an-hour wind would mean. So there was no previous history on this kind of hurricanes. We were used to the Category 1, Category 2, Category 3 hurricane, which was George in 1998. But then it came all this period of time where we had no hurricanes, and people forget. There's a very short memory. And although for 30 years in my life, I've dedicated it to hurricane education and natural hazard education, believe me, nothing ever prepared us to what we had to face with Hurricane Maria. It was extremely difficult, and I know many houses are well built because there are many successful studies, and we have made hurricane education campaigns. As you know, for almost 20 years I've had a hurricane publication called Rayito el Cazahuracán, which is a hurricane hunter that I take to schools, and I have a hurricane education programs. I even have a hurricane museum. And we do hurricane safety campaigns for a year. We go to shopping centers.
And people turned out. I mean,
and there's a great turnout.
There were more people at the Puerto Rico Hurricane Awareness Tour stop than any other awareness tour stop, domestic or foreign. It was thousands every time we went there.
Exactly.
So people were turning out. And
yeah.
people were listening to you.
And people listen, but there's a disconnect. I don't know if that's the right word, but people disconnect from the fact that, okay, I understand that there's a threat, but I really don't know, because then we have many meteorologists in the island, people that think they know by looking at the aero model or the GFS, and then they start even to question the meteorologists. So there's a societal response to the meteorology that makes it sometimes very difficult for the meteorologists to get the message across. And even with that, even understanding that, then you have the government, and you have the emergency managers, and you have all these different levels of response that you have to convince so that they can take action. And one of the things that perhaps hurt us the most was the fact that Irma, which was an excellent forecast, And I knew, and all the meteorologists knew it was a perfect forecast. For some reason, people thought that, oh, because it skirted Puerto Rico, it didn't come, then Maria is going to do the same. I don't know where people got that from, but still today, I get the same kind of story. And right now, we're trying to focus our education efforts in building safer and stronger. As you can tell from all of these pictures that you're looking at the slideshow, you're going to see damages from wind, from rain, from landslides, from storm surge, and look at the energy grid. It is completely outdated, and we need a huge transformation on the energy part of it. When I look at the emergency management, I look at different areas, Rick. Okay, when we have an emergency, we have the energy issue, we have health issues, we have housing issues, we have communication issues, we have supplies issues, education issues, social services issues, and it's very complex. And then when you talk about resilience, you have to think about the resilience of all of these pieces so that we can really have a resilient community. And I think one of the most important challenges that we have right now is how we can get our communities to be self-managed with self-determination, because there are things that the government or the insurance industry will never supply. And in those first 72 hours, which are critical, you have to survive on your own. And believe me, even myself, which I consider the best prepared person in Puerto Rico, it really hit me hard having no electricity, no water, no services, no ATM, absolutely nothing. It was like going back into the 1900s for a few days and having nothing, and you couldn't do anything.
Now, I want to talk a lot more about the aftermath and recovery in a moment, but one last thing about beforehand, in the days leading up to it. How did you feel like the public was responding to the forecast, the warnings, the instructions from emergency managers? I mean, how was it going in Puerto Rico before Maria actually made landfall in those last few days?
Because of the Hurricane Irma, it was the first time that Puerto Rico was threatened by 185-mile-an-hour wind with Irma. Because even at a point we were on the cone, right? So we knew that some kind of impact we were going to have. And so everybody was very scared for Irma, very scared. And you could see everybody, doing things. But then we lost the northeast part of the island, the metro area and the northeast suffered plenty of damage. And we lost electricity. So it was very difficult, and communications, for us to get the Maria information out, because there were people already without electricity. So social media turned out to be the platform, or through TV and radio, of course, but radio and social media was very important in managing the information for Hurricane Maria. Many people, so that you have an idea, on Wednesday, September 20th, that was when Maria hit Puerto Rico, okay, in the morning. 6:15 in the morning, we had the eye through the southeast corner of the island. But since Friday and Saturday, especially Saturday when it was declared as a potential tropical cyclone, and then it became depression and Tropical Storm Maria, in 24 hours, we had a major hurricane. It increased approximately 75 miles an hour in 24 hours. You can imagine the kind of stress that all meteorologists had just to make sure that we took the message. Then you had people, for example, in media or in social media saying, oh no, it deviated 10 miles, so this is going to, that's not gonna hit us. And they were applauding and everything. So it was very difficult for us. The sense of urgency that we wanted to put in the message, then you're hysterical. Then you're making people scared. because, hey, I am looking at a truck that is coming toward us, and you have to do something about it because nothing is going to take it away. So it took a lot. So what I did is I was on TV with WIPR, I was on radio with WKAQ, and also in my social media, every 3 hours I would be doing the bulletins. And just for you to have an idea, I mean, for Puerto Rico, this is quite high. I had 31 million views from September 1st through September 20th. So that to me, that was, no need to, Just to let you know that people were hungry for information. They needed someone to tell them the things right. And although they didn't want to believe it, we need to do something about it. And let me tell you something, I cried, and I'm not ashamed of that. I cried when I was very scared. And I cried on social media. And at a point, I prayed with everyone. And still, I get emotional. You have to do what you have to do. That's it. Your mission is saving lives. That's it.
And it's your home.
And it's your home. Yeah. And you just have to do what you have to do.
In the immediate aftermath, how bad did it seem compared to days, weeks, months later? I mean, was it obvious how bad it was, or did it take a while for it to become more apparent once you knew what had happened in some of the remote areas?
We didn't understand the magnitude. Yeah. We didn't, because we didn't have anything to find out. We couldn't even fly a helicopter because they couldn't communicate with the persons that were in charge of flying helicopters and determining what was going on around the island. So, I mean, we were totally isolated. You know, the island environment presents many, many challenges. You have to survive by your own. All our ports had problems. You couldn't get fuel because the markings, the buoys, you know, all these things that should be in place, they were not in place. So everything was difficult. You couldn't get money, you couldn't get water, you couldn't get gas or fuel. Although you had an electric generator, you couldn't find the diesel or the gas because you would have to make lines for 8 to 10 hours. Then, you know, we were asking how, you know, people died. How many people died? But we didn't know. Actually, we still don't know. We still don't know. We know that the number have increased exponentially, but direct deaths, perhaps 10. The indirect deaths, it's much higher. So we didn't understand the magnitude. And still, let me tell you, since we were away, we didn't have any TV or, you know, means of communicating for such a long period of time. I mean, many people didn't celebrate Christmas last year, okay? They're celebrating Christmas this year for the first time, okay? So every time I go and present something about the hurricane, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know it was like that. So people in the island, and we're 100 by 35 miles, they still don't know the magnitude and the scope and why it has been so frustrating and difficult to get things going, because it's just difficult. It's difficult at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level. It's just difficult.
And not coming at this politically at all.
Oh, no, not at all.
Totally from me on a human level, watching it from Atlanta and covering it on the air and knowing people there. It stirred my emotions in many ways, the weeks and the months afterward. At times I felt sad, at times I felt angry at the situation, at the aftermath and how long it was taking to help people, the lack of communications, the lack of power and so forth. Give us a sense for what the emotional toll has been. What feelings did you go through, and what feelings did people on the island go through, especially as the aftermath extended for such a long time, so in such an unpleasant way.
As you can
And-
tell, yeah.
And isn't over yet.
Yeah, it's
But we
not
talked
over.
yesterday a
Yeah,
little bit about
exactly.
some of your different emotions that you went through.
Yeah, it's very emotional, as you can see. Because still at the community level, I mean, you have to go into the details. And when you go to a home or a house and you have a child and you interview them and ask them, you know, how are you doing? How did it go with the hurricane? And this child, which is 7 or 8 years old, tells you, well, it wasn't good. It was very bad. I thought I was going to drown. So what are we doing to our children? How much do we owe them on terms of their safety and building resilient communities, at least for them? So yeah, it's being emotionally difficult for all of us. I was in a school in Yabucoa last week. This is the first time they have their honor roll activity because they couldn't do it last year. And I asked the director of the school, so how are the kids doing? And she says, well, we're trying to make sure that they're stable, but they're not. So you have to look at each case, family by family. We still have a teacher in one of our resilient schools that have no roof and doesn't have a home. There are many problems because many people in Puerto Rico, especially the ones that have low income, they do not have deeds in their houses. So they don't comply or they don't fill the requisites to get the federal assistance. And although there are many organizations which are helping a lot, something I found, and probably the most important lesson I've taken from all of this, is that, you know, we're not alone. Although we think that hurricanes or catastrophic hurricanes, they're going to be devastating, it comes to a point that you feel that there's so many beautiful people around you that understand and give you a hand. I was in Utuado, which is about 3,000 feet up in the mountains, and all of a sudden I found a group of nurses from New York, you know, doing health checkups in people. So those stories are so beautiful. That gives me hope that we are going to make it. We will. But what I'm really afraid of is that we have another hurricane, a catastrophic hurricane, or if we have a devastating earthquake. That's really haunts me every night.
Now, many of the communities where some of the worst damage occurred is not San Juan. It's places that were, and maybe still are, completely cut off, roads and bridges taken out, people of lesser economic means. Tell us about some of the untold stories about some of the communities in Puerto Rico that haven't been covered in the news media.
Well, I think the problems maybe is that there are not enough resources. And resources were not deployed quickly in some areas. And funding is not getting quickly enough to some people. And still, there are many communities which are living under tarps, blue tarps. There are different stories. People that are elderly, those were the ones that really suffered the most in this hurricane. When Ken was talking about the indirect deaths, you know, I wish that my message, if I go back, people ask me, what will you do different? I need to change my message to focus on the indirect deaths. I need to do more on that, because that's exactly how we lost people, of taking care of the health. I've been going into a campaign with one of the insurance companies for elderly people and letting them know what to do and why do they need supplies, why do they need for example, hospitals. Hospitals, we lost many people in intensive care because there was no electricity. There was not enough fuel to keep the electric generators in the hospitals. So we lost children in the ICU. We lost persons in the intensive care units. People could not get into the hospitals to get the care they needed. For example, in Utuado, there was a person who died during the hurricane and they couldn't get them out for 8 days because of the landslides and the difficulty. So, yeah, there are many stories and they're personal. And every time I talk to someone, somebody died. So what do I need to do different? How, as a community, we need to do different? So right now, hospitals are considering to have areas where if you have a person that is sick and it's a hurricane coming, then they can provide refugee, a shelter in a hospital, which is good because we need that health care.
Yeah, people need to shelter next to where care can be immediately provided, even in the aftermath.
Exactly,
right?
especially if you live in a very difficult area to go to.
So that changes the evacuation conversation in an island environment, or even in a continental environment, that people should be evacuating to or taking shelter somewhere that can meet their particular medical needs.
Exactly, and now there's a business emergency operations center, which I think is really good because businesses were having a tough time and they provide services and they need fuel, and there's some hospitals and some services should become the most important essential services. So things are changing, the conversation is changing, the plans are improving, and I know that we will be better and we will become safer and stronger, but still we are in that difficult road. I had a conversation with someone that went through Katrina, and he told me, 3 years at least in this difficult road, but you're just going through the first year. Right. So give us 3 years. I said, oh my God.
And resilience must be taking on a much bigger, more complex meaning for you, given, and everybody in Puerto Rico, given that a lot of people have left.
Mm-hmm. That is a problem also.
There is a measurable increase in school enrollments here in the state of Florida of people who have left Puerto Rico. The economic future, how do you envision, I mean, this is not an issue any one person can solve, but as you think through, okay, what can we do next? How do you envision the next several steps, or what does Puerto Rico need to come back to where it was before, or become even better? Yeah,
I think that I am trying to work, especially through the museum, with two specific communities. The communities in general, what we call the barrio, el vecindario, so that they can get organized and get resources to be resilient. For example, let's get the science to these communities and the technology so that they can identify where are the elderly, where are the handicaps, where are the resources, where are the doctors, where are the people, where are your vulnerable areas, to understand the maps, but at the local level, because we need to give them the tools. Also with the schools. Schools are very important because schools especially is where you develop the skills and the knowledge that will take you toward the future. So we're working with teachers and students, especially developing a school resilient program where we certify schools that go through a portfolio of disaster project-based learning activities. We are rebuilding the weather infrastructure in Puerto Rico through through grant fundings. We're getting weather stations into schools and making sure that students understand what the weather is like in their community and why do they have to be safe. Incredibly enough, We lost all weather infrastructure in Puerto Rico. We lost the radar.
And it's back, right?
It's
It
back,
has been
thank
reconstructed.
goodness,
All right.
since June last year. And there you go.
Yeah, you saw it in the previous
you can
picture,
saw it
right.
there. Now it's called, the dome is color green because it is in the forest in Cayey. So there you go.
And let's not underestimate how important this is, because as
Yes.
you told me yesterday, even the least bit of rain gets people on edge, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, kids will, every time that there's a strong wind or heavy rain, is Maria back? That's the question, is Maria back?
And you've got your flood season that you just went through. Even if you don't have hurricanes, you've got flash flooding most of the year.
And then we've had rain, continuous rain for almost a year. Every day we have rain. And we have some vulnerable areas because of the topography of the island. 75% of the island is mountains. So we have plenty of landslides. All our vegetation was gone. Not one leaf was left in any of the trees. So now we have a very weird looking vegetation, and because there are no branches, no horizontal branches. And even El Yunque rainforest, as you probably have visited or known, well, it is opening the trails now, but there are still many landslides. So the rain was a real big issue.
Wow. I know we could talk all night, but one of the main questions I think people are asking now is what's for dinner. So we got
yeah, we have to finish up. No.
But I want to give you the floor before maybe we open it up for one or two questions. What have we not yet talked about that you want everybody to know that maybe we don't know about Puerto Rico, and what your hopes are going forward?
Thank you for that, and I had to write it because I didn't want to forget. I don't think that we can have any foundation, nonprofit, or any agency to pull back on their commitments to Puerto Rico. We need to learn the lessons to repeat this story again in the future. We have pulled together through collaboration and community integration, and now we need to have a chance to be a resilient island. It has taken time to understand the magnitude and implication of this hurricane, but at least it has made me a better meteorologist and a better human being. We are scientists serving our community. We are the trusted sources, but we have the responsibility to do it because we're here to save lives. And we need to make resilience as part of our lives. We need to be examples. First of all, us. Then we can ask everyone else to be resilient, because if we don't do it, it's like climate change. If you're not part of the solution and an example, how can you ask anybody else to do it the same way? And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Well said. Thank you.